Coach talks about you never know which play it's going to be in the Super Bowl, and there was probably 30 of them tonight that if any one of those would have been different, the outcome could have been different. But I'm so proud of our guys, our coaches, the team. It's unbelievable, what these guys have accomplished all season. I'm just proud to, be a part of this great group. Thank you to all our fans, everyone back in Boston, New England. We love you. You've been with us all year. We're bringing this sucker home. Tom Brady.
Tom Brady, that was February 2017 after Super Bowl 51, an amazing comeback against the Atlanta Falcons. Won't call it his finest hour because, frankly, he's had a lot of fine hours. And this afternoon, he has confirmed what since Sunday in particular we all thought was coming, his retirement from the sport. Very happy to bring in Tara Sullivan of the Boston Globe. Hey, Tara.
Hello, how are you?
Very well. Quiet day over there, I would think.
Slow news day.
Yeah. So Tom Brady, in his lengthy statement, he said, "I've always believed the sport of football is an all-in proposition. If a 100% competitive commitment isn't there, you won't succeed." And naturally enough, he's reached the conclusion he can't make that competitive commitment.
Yeah, it's funny. I thought it was funny anyway. He didn't use the word retirement. A lot made over here in New England that he also didn't use the word Patriots anywhere in that retirement announcement. But he didn't actually use the word retirement. It's almost like maybe he's not quite ready to chew on that word, or I don't know. But I do think it speaks to everything that made Brady great was not only his talent, but the work, the dedication, the all-in, that, just outworking everybody. And that was such a big competitiveness, just that intense competitiveness to win. I think all of that is what made him great. So to speak to that in his announcement to me was not at all surprising. It makes sense.
7 Super Bowls, 22 seasons, 5-time Super Bowl MVP, 3-time NFL season MVP, any number of passing records you care to mention. First Super Bowl was in 2002. Last Super Bowl was in 2021. It's an utterly outrageous career. He is the greatest champion. He has the greatest career. He's the most accomplished NFL player, without question. Is he also the greatest player?
That's a great question, and I think people will have fun debating it because we're so biased toward the quarterback for sure, and of course the quarterback has to do the most on the field, that I think it's fair to probably elevate that position. It's hard to argue. It's just hard to argue. I know we always have recency bias and we're looking at Brady right now, but I just cannot imagine, another career that matches it or us ever seeing another career like it. So, for me, from my perspective, he's the best NFL player that I've ever seen. And I know I don't go prior to his career, but I think he has to be number one.
See, I would have thought so too. And I'm not an NFL aficionado at all, but I just think there's a very natural hesitancy on everyone's part to say with any kind of certainty that he's the greatest player of all time, because it feels like a very unfair thing to do, to compare different generations, to compare different positions. And yet it also just looks blindingly obvious when you take a glance at his career. I would have thought, actually, I saw Marca over in Spain the other day when his initial retirement was made and then deleted and all that messing around went on. But they weren't talking, is he the greatest NFL player in history? They were saying, is he the greatest sports person in history?
Yeah.
Is he the greatest athlete in history? And Messi, Pele, Maradona, Muhammad Ali, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, whoever you want to mention, he's more that conversation. He's almost automatically the NFL representative, is almost how the world sees him.
It's a great question, but really that speaks to his global impact, which does also to a large degree go with his recency, like that global impact, because he's one of the guys who helped bring the NFL to the global stage. I will tell you that even in New England, you would probably get some argument that he's the greatest New England champion of all time, because Bill Russell, who played for the Celtics and was an incredible basketball player, won more championships. So at different levels. But I would agree with you. You're right. The comparisons, that's what we have fun with in sports. We love to compare statistics. The numbers are such a big part of the conversation always. But it is difficult to compare different positions, different generations. Sure. Is Babe Ruth the greatest baseball player in America of all time, or somebody more recent? Who knows? But it's part of the fun, if you ask me. And I think for someone who has an opinion that Brady's number one, it's not necessarily a slight, on the Joe Montanas of the world. It's just this is the guy that I think when you combine it all, because not only was he one of the most talented with the numbers and compiling numbers and winning MVPs, he also is the best champion. So I think that's hard to argue with.
Who'd be his closest competition within the confines of NFL all-time greatness?
Yeah, it's funny because you almost had me thinking on the spot, like, who am I thinking of, right? Joe Montana, and Jerry Rice, who were great with the 49ers. Jim Brown, who was a great, considered the best running back of all time. I'd even have to stop and think about who even belongs in that conversation, on the defensive side, the Lawrence Taylors of the world. But I have a hard time off the top of my head even coming up with a comparable one right now, maybe because it's all Brady all the time at the minute. But the numbers are just impossible to counter with anybody else.
He released a very lengthy statement. So let me just list off, you've alluded to this point, let me just list off the various people and entities that Tom Brady does thank in this very long statement. He thanks, in no particular order here, his Bucs teammates. He thanks the Bucs fans. He thanks the city of Tampa Bay. He thanks the Glazer family. He thanks the Bucs GM, Jason Licht. He thanks Bruce Arians, the Bucs coach. He thanks the rest of the Bucs coaching staff. He thanks the remainder of the Bucs staff and employees. He thanks his personal trainer, Alex Guerrero. He thanks his agents, Don Yee and Steve Dubin. He thanks his parents and extended family. He thanks his wife and children. I think that's can't really think of who else. I mean, that kind of covers it, really. That covers my 22 years. So that's mic dropping out. I go, wow, that is so pointed. That's like a statement of war. It's
such an odd thing to have done, and I'm still now. Listen, in the time since the Patriots did a few things on social media, right? Like the franchise social media account put up this kind of cute animation picture of the boat sailing away, and Tom riding off into the sunset. Congratulations with all of his Super Bowl. It's kind of a cool thing. And Robert Kraft, of course, released a statement speaking to how much he loves Brady and what an honor it was, whatever, for him to play for the Patriots. And then Brady responded to that statement from Kraft on his Instagram story saying, thank you, love you all, whatever, to Patriots Nation. And in fairness, when he left the Patriots, he left with, beautiful sentiments toward the franchise, toward the coaches, toward the owner, toward the fans. And he had only good things to say when he visited Gillette and beat them, in this past season. But it's bizarre to me that he wrote that entire thing, 9 pages of an Instagram story, without mentioning the Patriots. I mean, to me, that is deafening in its silence. And also pointed, maybe there's something bigger. I don't know. Maybe, I hope that the Patriots have something planned and that Brady is all in on, maybe a one-day contract and retiring a Patriot, something like that. But impossible not to notice that he didn't mention not even just the Patriots, their fans, Belichick, but most of all, Robert Kraft, who, by all accounts, he has a great relationship with.
Yeah. Because it read like not a retirement statement, but a I'm leaving the Bucs statement,
Exactly, which was just a very odd way to approach it, and to just kind of say, well, because I saw, you read the social media accounts, well, you already said goodbye to the Patriots and told them he loved them, but this is different. I mean, he's leaving the game.
Yes.
And you're supposed to reflect on the entirety of the career, and as great as and fun, and listen, we all saw a different Brady in the 2 years with the Bucs, and we saw him be a little more glib and open and saying things that I'm sure he felt he couldn't say in those years with the Patriots because of the way Belichick sort of tamps down on all that interaction with the media. But I mean, you cannot. He's supposed to have looked at the entirety of the 22-year career, and the Hall of Fame portion of that is most certainly the time with the Patriots.
Oh, completely. Like the Bucs is a wonderful, fun finale. It's a rubber stamping of his greatness. It's him doing it without Belichick. But like the substantive part of his career is the Patriots, and on the day he retires from football, to not even give them a shout out towards the end. It doesn't have to be 4 paragraphs, but just a little nod to, by the way, thanks for the 20 years, guys. I mean, I can't wait to see if the front page of the Boston Globe is, well, we hate you too in the morning.
It just doesn't make sense to me. I wish I had a good explanation for it. Am I in Brady's head? Was he still Is he still chafed at how it all ended? Is he still frustrated that he had to hit free agency at all? But I wouldn't think that's the case because he clearly had so much fun in the 2 years in Tampa, and the things he said about that. So in the long run, I mean, he goes out on top. He's the one who won a title without Belichick. Like, there just shouldn't be. There's no need for any rancor, hard feeling, anything at this point. So,
No.
It read very strange to me. And what I'll say is I'm not sure that portion of the story is over yet. And I would give it some time to see if there's some other resolution or conclusion there.
Okay. Well, I could be wrong, but I read massive ill feeling suddenly because it is so pointed and dramatic. And any number of people in Brady's camp would have pointed out to him, you haven't mentioned the Patriots. This is a very conscious decision. So absolutely extraordinary. And just the fact that Kraft personally and the Patriots, after this statement, are crawling over themselves to try and reach out to him on social media suggests they're not consulted in any way. They're kind of reacting like everybody else. So I mean, any sense of a planned thing with the Patriots down the line, well, I would suspect there's nothing in place right now because Kraft and the Patriots coming after Brady after the statement today screams of a certain desperation. Yeah. Are we still friends? It seems like you hate us.
Well, yeah, the whole thing, I mean, and let's be honest, like from the very beginning, I can't, listen, Tom Brady is saying all in terms of where he is with his decision, the right things. Like I feel like I'm the luckiest man in the world, and to say that at the end of his career. But he can't feel great about how the whole thing went down, and the fact that whatever did get leaked over the weekend, and that was prior to the championship games, and that for a very media savvy guy like Tom, to kind of take the spotlight away and then have it. Even last night in his podcast with Jim Gray to say he was still mulling it over and then come out this morning. Like the whole thing to me has been very inartful. It's been a little bit clumsy. So that the fact that we still have some clumsiness today, maybe that's where I shouldn't be surprised. But I'm with you 100%. One sentence, one paragraph, something in there. There absolutely should have been something in that statement directed at the Patriots. And it certainly feels, like I said, for a savvy guy like Tom, that it had to have been deliberate.
Oh, yeah. Well, he would have done it deliberately, and then somebody in his team would have said, wait, are you sure? And he would have said yes. Right. So it's, there's a few strikes there. Of his career, I mean, it's impossible to cover everything because it was just so outrageous and there's so much longevity. 22 years, 7 Super Bowls. It's interesting. First Super Bowl in 2002, another in 2004-05. There is a 10-year gap there without a Super Bowl. 2 losses in between in 08 and 12. So from 05 to 15, there is that 10-year gap. Wins again in 17-19 and, of course, so famously in 21. In my memory, it doesn't strike me as if that 10-year gap was a period of soul-searching for Brady or question marks over Brady. But I could have that wrong. Was he always seen as great even in the midst of the 10-year drought?
Yeah, he was absolutely great. Because if you remember, the Super Bowl they lost both of those Super Bowls that they got to the Giants, and the one in 2007 they turned in the first ever perfect 18-0 regular.
That's the Eli Manning Hail Mary one.
The Eli Manning, it wasn't so much a Hail Mary, but the crazy catch with David Tyree, the helmet catch that's famous. And then of course again in 2011, that season they also lost to the Giants. No, the Patriots were completely dominant across the entirety. They won 11 straight division titles. They had a stretch of playing, I think, in the conference championship game 5 straight years. The fact that, to me, what's more remarkable is not the fact that there was some gap in there. It's that he actually staged 2 different dynasties that far apart. That's part of what separates him even from other winners like a Michael Jordan or something like that, or maybe LeBron, but there's not as many there, but to have affected that kind of dynasty twice in 2 different, he's the only guy to win a Super Bowl in 3 decades, all of it, that part of it is just amazing. But to answer your question specifically, there was no drop off on Brady's part in those years. They just happened to, hit it. Peyton Manning was playing at the same time. The Ravens, who had an incredible defense there for that one stretch, got him in one playoff game. And then the Giants happened to bite him twice in the Super Bowl. But he was still in the conversation every year.
Every year. Was he? Okay. Because to take another...
other than one injury year.
One injury year. Because to take another kind of sports person who would be in the... Is he the greatest sportsman of all time, all sports? Tiger Woods occasionally had 18-month, 24-month gaps when the sport at large was saying, what's going on with Tiger? Why is Tiger not winning? He's working on a swing. He's changing his swing. This is a real fall off in his performance. Did Brady even have a season where people were saying, God, he's not at it?
Really not. I mean, no. There were some issues, really, that final season with the Patriots, where it seemed like his legendary accuracy wasn't quite the same. But honestly, I don't think it was as much the drop off of him. It was the lack of talent, and it was more of a mental kind of exhaustion of all that time with the Patriots than it was a physical problem. No, really, Brady maintained an incredible level of expertise, if you want to call it that. Like, it goes to sort of the remarkable consistency. That's as big a part of the conversation with him as anything, because he never tailed off on the work stuff, and so it never really translated on the field. It's a credit to the people around him, certainly, but no, he really, like I said, he wasn't the guy that you were saying, like, oh wow, he's done. Yes. You just weren't saying that. And look, he's going to retire off having led the NFL in passing yards at age 44.
So we're talking about outrageous consistency, outrageous longevity, and then also an ability to deliver the high points and deliver on the pressure moments as well. Is there an hour that jumps out to you as his finest?
Oh gosh, I think I was thinking about that today. You have to mention the Super Bowl, the one when he beat the Falcons and they were down 28-3, and he just kind of willed that team to victory. And I think in particular that season, that moment, because it came at the end of the season that started with the 4-game suspension over that Deflategate issue, which is one of the kind of controversies that hung over Brady. I think that season, that game, because it just said so much about him, how he was able to translate perceived slight into motivation, how he was able to get teams, players around him to believe in something that he believed, and then literally how he was able to throw, and make the right plays in the game, some of the best throws we've seen him ever make to win that game. So for me, I'd have to pick that from his perspective and what he was able to do, that win over the Falcons.
The extraordinary thing, of course, here with Brady, and this is not new information to virtually anybody, but he was a 6th round pick. His combine video does not blow anybody away with his explosiveness. The 199th player in the 2000 draft, I'm sure this has been much talked about. How did that happen?
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, it's an inexact science, right, in drafting. And I think when you're doing those sorts of measurables, it's very easy to overlook somebody's personality and drive and the other things that Brady obviously has in abundance. Now, in fairness, he was a great athlete. Like, it's not as if people should have overlooked his athleticism. He was also drafted by professional baseball, but, physically he was not imposing. He didn't look, what's the word we should say? He certainly didn't look, his physique didn't look cut or anything like that, or in great shape. So it's a huge fun part of the conversation, I think, that he took that, like I said, that perceived slight, that motivation that came from this internal need to prove people wrong. And it really fueled his entire career. He kind of never let go of that edge. Listen, the guy won every game possible, every title, married a supermodel, whatever, and still felt he had to prove something to the world. And a lot of that can be traced to, being the 199th pick of the 2000 NFL draft.
Can I ask you about 3, what would be the right word? Not quite controversies, 3 issues which hang over Brady to some extent or other, and you can give me some thoughts on them. So the 3 that jump to my mind, and this is just my perception from afar, his love of Donald Trump I find upsetting in the extreme. I appreciate many people in America vote Trump, so maybe it's less egregious in many parts of the world, but the Trump stuff was just a bit ugh. Alex Guerrero, the guru, and then Deflategate you mentioned. Those are the 3 kind of areas with Brady where I raise an eyebrow. With Deflategate, this is going back a number of years now, where the balls were air removed, easier to throw, easier to catch, and the NFL report into this found that Brady was, quote, at least generally aware, end quote, of the wrongdoing. And the US Court of Appeal upheld the investigation's findings. To what extent is this, and you mentioned the 4-match ban for that, to what extent is this a big black mark over his career, or does it pretty much drift out to sea in the context of 22 years?
Somewhere in between, because I think it certainly didn't drift out to sea, but I do think over time, when you see the way the NFL has not maybe overreacted to that extent in other things, and for some reason, I think there's a sense over time that maybe the NFL did overreact. Now, I always felt that because they felt very strongly that was an issue that came down to sort of integrity of the product on the field. And that's what they were always most, as opposed to say off the field issues, right? Mm-hmm. Like whether it's somebody getting arrested or something like that, like a Deflategate to the NFL's perspective spoke to the product on the field or an advantage on the playing field, which they had to protect the integrity of the game that way. But I do think over time it has dissipated somewhat and doesn't hang over him really like a black cloud or anything. It's just one of those things. Yeah, I mean, that I think seems curious. What I always remember was destroying his cell phone. Like, why did he not give them the cell phone? Things like that. But it's certainly there. But I do think it has dissipated somewhat from the frenzied, heightened kind of intensity at the moment. Mm.
So what about Alex Guerrero then? How would you describe him? As Brady's personal guru, doctor, alternative medicine?
Yeah, I mean, trainer certainly, and business partner on many, many levels, and a very close friend. He's referred to him often as one of his closest friends. So, yeah, I mean, the Guerrero relationship certainly contributed to that end or the frostiness with the Patriots, because the Patriots at one point then stopped allowing Guerrero to be in the locker room and on the sidelines because they felt that he had too much influence over Brady, or maybe was then started influencing other players into changing training regimens, and the Patriots really wanted the control over that kind of thing. I don't think it's like listen, he can be friends with his people, but Guerrero, to me, there's been some weird science things associated with him too. So, but I think from a business perspective, people just allow for Brady to have pursued his own thing, and it's turned into a brand. We know that, right? The TB12 method and the gyms and all that. And it's hard to argue with the result, because I think from a physical standpoint, whatever Brady was doing was working for him. I think the Patriots just resented at some points where they were trying to, spread that throughout the locker room when they wanted to maintain their own control of those elements.
And were there ever question marks over what they were doing behind the scenes, question marks about whether it was above board or not?
No, I mean, there were some questions with Guerrero completely separate from Brady about like this concussion water. Like there was some weird things that he had there was never questions of, illegal substance, anything like that. No, It really was always about the methods, the pliability, the stretching, emphasizing things that we weren't used to seeing in athletes. We're so used to, pumping up the muscles and weightlifting and that kind of thing. Whereas Brady and Guerrero came from a very different angle of pliability. And then, of course, it just mushroomed with the diet and the whole lifestyle. Okay.
How did, Democratic Boston and home of the Kennedys and everything, how did the Trump loving go down?
It's such a difficult one, because I think when it was most apparent, and it's before I kind of covered the Patriots, it was most apparent. It was before Trump had been elected, before Trump became quite as divisive, and just destructive as he would ultimately become. So I think once it started going down that road, Brady just removed himself from the conversation and just didn't answer questions about it, and removed the MAGA hat from the lot, that kind of a thing, right? And just didn't entertain the conversation. But I will it didn't go over well. I mean, it didn't go over well with the political base in Massachusetts. From fan to fan, I can't answer for you, but he certainly took blowback for it, no doubt about it. Yeah. Especially in the NFL, which with all the social justice initiatives and things like that.
Yeah. And did Brady strike you as a political person at any stage? I mean, you mentioned the social justice situation in the NFL and Kaepernick in particular. Did Brady ever raise his voice loudly?
Not that I recall. No, he tended to stay pretty middle of the road, and not that I recall. My simple answer would be no. I do not remember him that way.
Because I certainly don't remember him, for instance, jumping to the defense of Kaepernick or raising that issue as an issue of concern. He just didn't show an interest in that world.
No, not that I recall either. Opposed to some of the other guys in the locker room, some of the other leaders through the years, like a Devin McCourty or something. Yeah, he did not make that a talking point.
Okay, well, look, each to their own, I guess, on that front. And are there any ideas about what he's going to do with the rest of his life?
It's just, I think we've seen so much of it already with these business interests, and he's starting a whole, the brand now lends itself to a clothing line. And, when you think about the Tiger Woodses and, Arnold, Jack Nicklaus, people who've then taken their name and created entire businesses around it. So, production companies, things like that. So I think he's already started those next phases. Really right now, based on what he said, I think it's probably got to be a little bit of a step back, spend some time with family. But from a business perspective, he's already got plenty on his plate.
Okay. Well, it is the most extraordinary career. 7 Super Bowls, 22
Absolutely.
seasons. We'll never see the likes of that again, I would think. Tara Sullivan of the Boston Globe. I might check out the Boston Globe over the next few days to see what you've made of his retirement statement, I think.
Please do. BostonGlobe.com.
Yeah, okay. Thanks so much, Tara. Appreciate it.
Thank you.